darkness?
There was sitting here.
This is the yeah, and that looks. If this is not yours, then because I feel about going to us for now. If you give it, yeah, otherwise you give it. Because I came into this room for my meeting, set up my stuff, and then suddenly some other chairs came in and said, "Oh, what the heck are you doing here?" You know, I just walked into the wrong room, set up everything up, and then was going to the wall. Let's get your sandwich delicious.
It's a very thick pencil. Hi, welcome to Friday. This is the last official session of this IETF, and things have started to fall apart slightly. We have pencils for the blue sheets, people kind of having a little bit of a discussion up here. While all that's going on, I'm going to need to browbeat you for a little bit. Guess what for? Magnus can guess what for. Go ahead and say it, Magnus. You know what we're browbeating for. Note takers. A former chair of the working group remembers very well. Since you answered, I'm not going to try and force you. Who feels like they could write down, "This was decided," along with a statement after it? You don't have to.
Now?
If you're willing to edit it afterwards, yes.
I will take this.
Thank you.
As long as it solely consists of "this was decided," I will do that.
All right. Our contributor, document author, area director, and the Right Reverend Rescorla will take charge of taking notes. Is there anybody in the Jabber who is not like completely absorbed in eating their? All right. Would you mind relaying anything from? All right. So now I'm going to look at the. Wait, you have to go back a second because this is like some really strange aspect ratio.
Justin's slides look like this. Well, you saw him, John Matson was like 8. His face was like 8 feet tall in the pictures. Oh, that was true. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, please don't touch the Epson. But I know we're all AV geeks. We would like to touch it. At least it's working now. It's kind of a funky aspect ratio. Note well. Hum now if you have not seen the Note well earlier in the week. Once again, Reverend Rescorla providing comedic relief in addition to note-taking and adult supervision. All right, next.
No, I'm not supervising. Adam's supervising.
Actually, I think we should probably bash this agenda yet one more time and thank Alyssa and welcome our new AD right now because there's yet more gifts.
It's a record. Nice.
Yeah. For those of you playing the home game, she said Richard will be so happy because Richard has volunteered to be the Sherpa for all of the records she's received throughout the week. Could we come up and address the group for a second? And then we'll have our new AD come up and address the group.
Note the chairs are playing for time because our main presenter for this meeting is.
No, he's on.
He's in.
Awesome.
He's in the
Great.
room. Yeah. Thank you again, RTC Web Working Group, for my additional gift. It's awesome. I will need to invent another reason to travel with records in the future. Not that I'm traveling this time because Richard is taking all of them. But yeah, thanks. So much attention to detail, always. That's why documents have taken so long here. And that's why you remembered everything. So thanks.
Would our new AD like to address the group and put in a request early for what gifts he'd like when he's tired of us? Since we've worked for 3 of you so far.
So I've heard you say several times you're going to close by Prague. I just want to let you know that I'm holding you to that, and I'm very happy to hear it.
So I would like to refresh your memory that what we actually said was this was our last meeting in North America. That was the guarantee, and that we hoped to close by Prague. This is somewhat up to how well you browbeat your IESG colleagues when security considerations and various other documents come through. So you get to have the help of our current AD, since she hasn't actually left the IESG in that, but we would love to close by Prague.
You look like you want to say something, Alyssa.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this before, but I'm going to continue to shepherd the documents from this group that are in the RFC editor's queue and IESG evaluation, which there aren't any. Yeah, so just the RFC editor's queue. So we get to share the pain of cluster 238.
Say your name. Yes. On with the circus.
Seriously, as a point of order, I'll be taking notes in the Etherpad. So if you wish to assist or heckle or whatever, that's where you do it.
Okay, so our next is FEC and WebRTC. Justin, would you approach the queue, please?
Am I on? Okay. I'm not sure why my camera's not working here, but I'll fix that in a minute. There's not a lot to say here on the FEC document. These are the same slides that I presented in the last IETF meeting. I got a number of good reviews on the document. I won't read off all the bullet points here, but basically this document is ready for last call. And incorporates the feedback to all the reviews that occurred over the last cycle. I encourage you to read it and send move to working group last call and send comments. Any questions?
So could I have folks raise their hand who have read at least one version of this document, please? Okay. You can raise half a hand. I don't know. Okay. Is there anybody who has an objection to taking this to working group last call now? Okay. Since we're taking it to working group last call now, I would like a commitment for at least 2 people to do a thorough review. You are all going to review it, of course, but 2 people to do a step-by-step review. Magnus, Bernard, and Mo. We've got 3 volunteers, which I have said into the microphone so they're available in the recording. Okay, thanks very much. Justin, you might as well stay. I believe you are our next presenter as well.
Okay, so we switch to the new set of slides.
Yeah, the slide should be up, Justin.
Okay. Let's don't keep. Okay, great. So we had a nice discussion in the last meeting about what do we, this whole thing around get user media and what does consent mean and all that sort of thing. And there's a lot of discussion in the room, and Martin gracefully accepted the work to sort of create a pull request. And what happened over then the next iteration of the document is that stuff all got cleaned up. The text that we kind of agreed on in the meeting around where do we talk about consent and what sort of language, especially the RFC 2119 language, where does that end up going in the document? That has all been fixed. The document now all uses RFC 2119 language throughout. We're making statements about, okay, thou must do this and that and the other thing. The document now reads as a normative thing rather than as a best practices document, which was its original intent. That had been previously mentioned as a review comment, and that has all been fixed. A few other review comments that came in around what is the exact definition of a proxy, and in which cases does the VPN situation that sort of begat this whole problem. Is some more definition about that, especially about the notion of split tunnels and how it creates the potential problem for IP address linkage. That now all been incorporated into the document. So the next thing is really working group last call and getting further reviews.
So once again, a question to the group. Who's read this version of the document? Please raise your hand. Okay, that's a little low. So we really need folks to review this. We can do a working group last call to initiate the review, but I'd like at least one or two more people to review it and say ready for working group last call. Who can commit to doing that in the next week or two? One? Okay, we have one.
It's very small, so
to look.
A very quick read.
It is, I mean, it's like 9 pages or so. Okay. No.
Oh, totally. Yes.
This is IP handling.
About IP handling. Right.
Okay, if you scrape the boilerplate out of this is like 4 or 5 pages. Please, guys. Just all we're looking for is send it to the mailing list with ready for working group last call. As soon as we see a couple of those, we will emit the working group last call. Okay, but this is okay. I think we have 3 volunteers now.
All right.
4 volunteers. Great. So as soon as a few of those come in, we'll start the processing. Thank you.
Okay, that is everything then.
Hey, I'm Ben Schwartz, and this is Return. Next slide. So it may have been a long time since the last time you heard about Return. We haven't been talking about it a lot recently. It's kind of a settled issue, I think. But just as a reminder about why we're talking about this at all, our requirements document says that we have to be able to provide a mechanism for enterprise network operators to run all of their traffic to return server. And we also already provide a method for application operators to run all of their traffic through return server. So we need some description of what happens when both of these things are on at the same time. And return describes what you do in that case. Next slide. It looks like this. Note that it looks a lot like the case where you're running everything through an HTTP proxy on an enterprise network. The only difference really is that you at least have the option to have an end-to-end UDP path, which should be good for performance. Next slide. Okay, Return the draft is referenced in a couple of places. One of the places it's referenced is in TRAM in the Turn Auto Discovery draft, which just says if you discover something through Turn Auto Discovery, you should use it in a return-like fashion. Next slide. It's also referenced actually kind of all over the IP handling draft, but here's the most substantive reference. One thing I want to call out about this reference is that it describes a return proxy as configured for the interface. So it reflects this idea that a return might be something that's only configured for a single interface. And of course, that makes sense in the context of something like an enterprise proxy. If you have a phone, for example, that's on an LTE network and it's on an enterprise Wi-Fi network, then there might be a return proxy on the enterprise network that's only accessible through that interface. So probably the configuration should be treated as associated with that interface. Okay, next slide. So this is the only change from return 1 to return 2, which I made like Monday. Previously, I was to try to describe how to deal with multiple interfaces. I was referencing MMusic, ICE Best Interface. That draft expired years ago and hasn't seen any updates. So I've attempted to bring in language that brings this into alignment with the IP handling draft and reference the IP handling draft instead. But again, this is all just guidelines about how clients should behave when put in the situation of having multiple turn servers, and also some descriptions about if you're configuring a client, if you're producing an interface for client configuration, what kinds of functionality you need to support. Next slide. So if we want to shut down the working group, then we need to do something with all the drafts. I think this might be a good candidate for last call, but I defer to the experts.
Okay, once again, we are looking to the working group to see who has read at least one version of this draft. Okay. Okay, so I think we'll do the same thing here and ask for a couple of volunteers to review it to indicate that they think it's ready for working group last call, just as a check. It looked like Jonathan, you and Martin were potential stuckies there. Can I ask you to take that token? Jonathan says he can take a look. Martin is looking now.
So it is unnecessarily long. It says the same thing in many different ways several times.
Yeah, so the Housley principle says that you should try and say things just once and not say them slightly differently in multiple places. But we all understand I did not have the time to write a sort specification, so here's a long one. If folks can figure out things to cut from this as part of your review because they are said adequately and succinctly elsewhere, those are valid review topics.
There's a question from the Jabber about asking about implementation status. If anybody can say anything.
This is, as far as I know, this is not something that is yet implemented. You could say that maybe implementations have been waiting to see how auto discovery turns out. That's one possibility. I would really like to start writing code on this, and maybe I'll get a chance in the next few months, but I can't commit to it.
What level of standardization are you asking for?
I am not familiar enough with the process to know.
Okay, I would not be in favor of having a proposed standard that nobody appears to be implementing.
So
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with other things.
So I would note that the IP handling draft does refer to this multiple times. So you probably want in your reviews of the IP handling draft to see whether the IP handling draft still works if these are informational rather than or experimental rather than proposed standard. But I think that it probably does, that it's worth the working group taking a squint at it.
Yeah, Martin Thompson. From my reading of the IP handling draft, the references to this would be advisory at best. So I think we could probably get away with it.
Does this also, is there anybody here who's a TRAM? Are you also involved in TRAM for the auto discovery? Okay, so we will take an action.
Sorry. I don't think it changed.
Okay, so we'll take an action item. The chairs will take an action item to contact the folks over at TRAM to make sure that if this goes to informational rather than PS, that doesn't cause a problem for their auto discovery draft, and we can go from there. Bernard, it looks like you have a concern.
Just a comment to say, I think this does solve a real problem. And if you look at some of the stats on WebRTC connectivity failures, there is kind of an extra couple of % in these enterprise kind of use cases. And so it's important, I think, that eventually people have some guidance about what you're supposed to do about this. And if this is informational, it could create situations where these failures could persist over time, which is probably not a great idea. So, my guidance would be to choose something. If it's not this, it has to be something else. And if you think this is good, why not make this the standard?
So, I mean, I have no objection to this being made standard if people are actually going to implement it, but my experience, over the years has been that if no one's implementing it, the chance that it's really not got a bunch of defects is pretty high. So that's my objection.
I think realistically, you either need something like this, or I don't think the TLS candidate work is enough to actually fully address this problem. So, by itself.
I'm not in any way arguing that we shouldn't do something like this at some point.
If you're saying it might be a standard, then possibly the right thing to do is make it experimental and play with it and then upgrade it later, rather than just make it informational where it can't go anywhere.
That would also be fine. I would also be. It's been a while since I read this, but it seems like we could also punt it to tram, and that we wouldn't have to worry about the problem of if it's a long pole for closing the group down. Again, I'm not opposed to this work at all, and I'm happy to see it advance at a low level of standardization. I'm happy to see it advance at a high level of standardization if people are going to implement it. The only thing I'm opposing is high level standardization with no implementations.
John Lennox, I mean, I think there's a goal not only to close the group down, but also to clear cluster 238, which this is a part of and blocking part of. So.
Okay, Simon Perrault as tram chair. We're also trying to close down our group.
Alyssa Cooper, you don't have to listen to my advice anymore, but I wouldn't close this group before cluster 238 is done. So I think what we really would say when you're closing the group is that you're not going to meet again, but the group should still be here to comment on documents as they go.
We expect the ISG to keep up with the rate we were at. It should all be dealt with by today. We want to close the group.
It's not going to be the ISG that's going to be standing in the way of that.
Martin Thompson, given the level of connection between cluster 238 and this draft, which basically comprises of the IP handling document, I'm wondering if it's possible to just find some way to break that connection. The amount of text in the IP handling draft that relies on return is kind of small. And I realize that it's kind of fundamental to the IP handling thing, but can we talk about it in the abstract without talking about the specifics or something like that?
So, Pat Hardy, speaking, I would be very reluctant to attempt to hand wave that particular thing away, since without an effective mechanism to do that, IP handling isn't even advice, it's just theoretical musing.
Well, no, there's some concrete things in there that we're doing. I mean, this really only touches on one of the aspects of the IP handling document. And if the discussion was in the abstract proxies, and then this talks specifically about the IP handling draft and says, this defines a proxy as the IP handling draft defines it, then we sort of reverse the order of the dependency, and this then pops out of the cluster.
We may be over-engineering a problem that doesn't exist here. I actually, like, it looks like an IP handling, it's an informational reference anyway. I don't think this is part of cluster 238, though we want to go forward. And
the RC editor may consider it as such. We might just have to remind them. Then.
No, not if it's informational. But
yeah.
I mean, we may have it messed up in some other document. We can check the references are correct. But the key thing I heard was we all want this work to move forward, and there was some question whether it should be experimental or PS, and that was completely dependent on where the implementation status was at the time. And when we get a little bit farther out, or maybe like when we finish working, or how about during working group last call, we determine whether we want to change the status to experimental. Does that sound like a reasonable conclusion?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the document in a while, but
Yeah,
once I've reviewed it, I'll have an opinion on that, and we can discuss
figure
it.
that out. But I think we're starting to engineer a problem that might not exist for ourselves here.
Fine. That's right. Can we waste the time we have available?
Yes, but please let Harold do it.
Hi, John. I checked the all drafts with RTC Web in the names. There are 2 references. Both are informative. I did not check the tram drafts.
Is that it? I believe that the reference from the tram draft is also marked informative.
Okay, and but transports references the tram draft, but the tram draft, it's informational in the tram draft.
I believe it's marked as such.
Okay.
I am just looking at my dependency graph here. I am 90% sure that the transitive closure, it's not normative anywhere.
It seems there are no more questions. So
Magnus, were you about to? Looked like you were about to get on. Okay, so let's go back to the theory we had before, where we're looking for a couple of folks on the list to say, yep, this is ready for working group last call, just to get a little bit of review under our belts before we take it to the final review. At that point, during final review, we will seek review from TRAM and from other working groups at the same time, just to make sure that we're getting kind of that early cross review. And hopefully we can do that relatively quickly if folks can get the yep, ready for working group last call buttons pressed. All right, if you're willing to review this, please.
We already have volunteers, and Martin Thompson and Jonathan Lennox.
Okay. Bernard, could I ask you to read this as well? And Bernard Abova, because Bernard clearly thinks this is a good idea. Okay, so there was a very late agenda bash that we were going to do. If time allows, a gentleman who's I think sitting in the back there wanted to present some work on something called ORs. So this is not a work item of the working group, but it is RTC Web related. If folks are willing to spend a little bit of time. Magnus, you had something else?
Yeah, this is Magnus. I have another question. What's the status of secured architecture and security?
So those have to go back through working group last call. They went through a working group last call, some time ago now.
They need to be updated first.
They have to be alive.
Yes, the status of those is that, barring someone else doing them, I will do them once JSEP and TLS have both gone to PubRec, and I believe JSEP now is almost at PubRec, if not actually at PubRec, and
it's at the working group consensus awaiting write-up, which is
right. So once I no longer get to do anything on those 2 documents, then I will tend to these. If someone else would like to pick them up, I would appreciate that as well.
So I guess that's a question. Is there anybody who's interested in joining Ecker as an editor of these to finish this part of the process?
That's what I thought. Okay.
Okay. Get together with Ecker and talk to him a little bit about what that involves. Okay. Okay, so the next step, this is sort of the end of the agenda. If folks have planes to catch, you can go. Otherwise, the gentleman who wanted to talk about ORs, would you like to come up with your slides and we'll see if folks are interested in hearing that? Did he go away? Oh, there you are. Did you, which one of us did you send it to? Oh, sorry, you sent it to the list. Okay, so for those of you who have your email open, this also went to the list. Give me a second. No, just say yes.
Okay, thanks here for giving us the opportunity to present our draft. Our draft currently, can go to the first slide. The operator or release service architecture, I think, is another solution for the release service to the WebRTC. Okay, next. This is the general summary for the current state of WebRTC. We use the ICE stun and turn. It is composed many RC to solve the different scenarios. Next. And currently, stun turn deployment status is like the graph illustrated here. Although the P2P communication is unified by WebRTC client, but the stun turn server must be deployed by every web application provider. And for our service provider, we have deployment many brass device that has the CGN function to do the net-related transfer work. So we think can we utilize them to provide the unified stun turn infrastructure to the WebRTC application provider. So next. The motivation for this draft is, as I just said, the application provider need to deploy the server individually, which is a big burden because they must dealing with a large amount of release traffic, and the centralized server might cause the inefficient traffic path. And the third is the server need to resolve a large amount of relay address. Another problem is we have the dedicated solution for different requirements, which cause the implementation very complexly. Because, for example, we use the TCP-based client-to-client communication. We use IPv6 or host mobility, different RC to solve the different scenarios. Next. So we think we can propose OS architecture like illustrated this graph. So we utilize the distributed CGN device in our network and centrally control them via the release selector. So via the release selector, we can provide the service to different IPP provider. The main purpose is the operator can provide a unified release infrastructure, and the IPP provider need not care about the complex stun ICE single process and their deployment. So, yes. This is a general communication procedure. The main step for this communication is first the communication client should get the release selector from the IP provider, and then they can get the release device via the release selector. So they can, after that, they can send the one couple command to the release selector. That's the release selector to build the mapping table on the selected release service. So all these complex signaling finished between the RS and the CGN device. The IP provider just need to get the release address and the CGN address and get the reflex address of the two relay and two RS. This is the general communication procedure. Next. So we also compare the different point between stun server and OS. Currently, stun IC use different relay address for every client. In our structure, we allocate the every client under one relay, the same relay address. And currently, the solution, stun IC solution use a different single process and data transfer procedure. And in our OS solution, we use the same signal process and data transfer procedure. And the third difference is the release selection decision is done by every client in current solution, but in OS, the release selection done by the release selector. which have the whole system views. And the necessary singling, currently we require about 8 messages to finish such functions. But in OS, we need only 2 kind of singling to finish the work. So we also consider the listening with the turnstone IC. We think OS is not intended to be a full alternative to the turnstone IC. We consider it as a complementary solution for the SP server provider public release service. And we have implemented the SDK fulfill the peer TCP communication procedure under the OS architecture. The UDP communication procedure is the same and more simple. In our, we can finish any combination possibility from different object family. The client can belong to the IPv4 or IP6 or dual stacks. The communication procedure is the same. So next, we also look some feedback from the RTC web and from the IP provider. So we either useful work or.
Before we get to the mic line, just a clarifying question from the perspective of the chair. Reading through this, this does not, in fact, look like it's specific to WebRTC in any way. That it looks like it's something that a generalized mechanism related to the behave mechanisms like stun, churn, and ice. Is there anything in this that I'm missing that is, in fact, specific to WebRTC?
Maybe there are some additional message for the WebRTC client to, because it should contact with the RS release server. There is some additional not very.
Okay, so just to clarify that, then it sounds like if this were specified somewhere, then WebRTC or RTC Web as a working group might consider whether or not to adopt the mechanism, but developing the mechanism inside RTC Web does not seem like it's on charter for us. It's always useful to know what people are thinking about in this area, and since we had some extra time at the working group, I appreciate your taking the time to develop it. I'm happy to take the questions at the mic, but please understand that we don't believe it's on charter for this.
I know. The detailed procedure between the RS and the CGN is out of the scope of RS. I know, but there are some additional. There may exist some additional message between the WebRTC client and the release selector. Currently we think it is the web client should send the couple message to the release selector to tell the release selector to help them to build the communication channel. This is one kind of the change to the WebRTC client, maybe.
So I think we'll take the comments from the microphone.
Can you go back to your diagram with the messages, please? Yeah, great. Right. So for the specific case of WebRTC, why does it require any standardization at all? Namely, you already have a web app that's already talking to that provider, and that provider already knows your server reflexive address because that's how you came in for TCP. So why doesn't he simply contact the relay selector, get the correct coordinates for the relay, and hand them down to you as if they were his own relays? Sure. I don't know, but like that clearly is not a scope for RTC Web. I mean, I'm assuming they have some business arrangement. So I'm assuming that the RS publishes some web API. So I guess I don't understand why in the case of WebRTC would this require any standardization whatsoever. Yeah. So my point is that from the perspective of the browser, which is the thing we're standardizing here, this is merely another ICE server. And so the communication channel 2, which you need to do, is some private communication channel between the app provider and the relay selector. But once you've done that, you simply provide the coordinates of the relay to the host as if they were your own.
This is not the updated version. This is I have changed the procedure a little. Sorry. I have changed this slide a little, but it's not updated. Currently, the AP provider did not need not interact with the RE selector. Only the web client. No.
I think Justin's going to try to answer this question, perhaps, because I see him in the queue.
Okay, so we're going to bring Justin on.
Well, he's on his way. He's just very small and green.
So, Adrian and I have talked about this draft. I think that there's some interesting things here. I agree that as we're trying to sort of end the work in this working group, I'm not sure this is the right place for it, and I'm not sure that there's any actual mechanisms here that are specific to RTC Web. I think that there may be need for some work on the stun side of things, some small work there. And so I think that the ICE working group might ultimately be the final home for this. But one thing I'm not clear about is like the stun updates. Did that happen in TRAM or is that happening in ICE? Because I know TRAM is also trying to close down. And so if we needed any new stun message, like where would that go?
Don't look at me, man.
The tram chair has left the building.
Mosen, I agree with what Ecker said. You could probably already do most of this today. Did you realize that you can already poke in the ICE servers? You can already give what ICE servers you want to use from current WebRTC implementations and specs. And so really the only problem is how did you discover RS in the first place? So what's your current protocol for RS discovery? Is it automatic, or is there some pre-configuration of app providers to carriers that require?
Currently we think the APP provider should tell the location of the RS.
Is to a protocol or a configuration?
Maybe configuration. It is out of the scope of this stuff.
Okay. If it's just configuration, then this is already possible today because the web app can just provide this configuration and pick the relay selector.
Currently, if the client want to communicate with, first they must register to their APP server. So I think at the register process of they can get the relay service, relay address, RS address. If we must first register, and during the register process, we can get the address of the RS. If the client find the RS, then the following process can be continued. It is same as the pre-configuration.
Adam Roach. First, speaking as an individual, I think this is a very interesting problem. This is a little corner of a very interesting problem space, which is carrier-assisted NAT traversal, and this solves a small portion of it. I think, I would like to see the problem sort of treated as a larger space where we try to address more issues than this. For example, the way that I look at this, it looks like it only works like if you have two people within a single service provider, which is a good thing to fix. But I also think that we probably want to address a situation where you have people between service providers and aren't tromboning through a turn server like way off in some application provider's domain. So I think that it would be good to sort of back up and look at the problem space at as a bigger thing, and then start looking at solutions to address the problems in that space. Switching to my area director hat, what I said off the microphone, I just want it here on the record. I think this is the sort of thing we probably should take to dispatch so we do have the right people in the room.
We have one more comment from the Meet Echo. Randall, you're up.
I'm going to echo some of the stuff that Adam said. I think there's a larger issue here that we need to take a look at. And I think to a certain extent, this actually overlaps in some degree with some of the stuff that's been done with enterprise border turn support and so forth. You can consider a service provider to residential service provider and other service providers to be very similar to an enterprise border, and you could provide turn servers at that enterprise ISP's border. So I think there, like I said, it's a larger discussion of the large issues needs to be made, and then once we've broken that down, I think we'll have a better idea of what actually needs to get done. So I'm in agreement with him there, and I think that should occur somewhere, and I would imagine dispatch is a good place.
Sorry, this graph we just give a very simple scenario for communicating client located in the simple service provider. We also consider this the client located in different service provider. It is used in some tunnel procedure to make the communication happen. We can give such a solution in the next meeting or later for the more general scenario. This is just one more simple scenario.
Okay, I think you've heard the feedback from the room that the next step would be to consider it more generally and take it to dispatch.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think that wraps up our meeting, and for many of us, that wraps up the IETF. Thank you all for coming, whether in person or virtually, and we'll see you on the list.
Yes, sir.
Detail SSRTP. I was going to follow errata, making sure that it's right before I file it. The key lifetime says 2 to the 31, which I think is just a bug, and it's supposed to be 2 to the 48 for RTP and 2 to the 31 for RTCP. And I think it's just an oversight.
You should ask Dave.
Dave, yeah, I tried to ask Dave, and
I honestly don't know.
I haven't worked on it in a long time.
Neither have I, right? That's probably right. But
So I'll give you the 2-second version. Those limits only come from the IV construction. It has nothing to do with the underlying cipher or the key string. It's just the IV construction. In RTP, the IV is the sequence number on the rock, which is 48 bits. In RTCP, it's a 31-bit counter.
This sounds right to me, but I'd appreciate it if you'd actually send me an email because I'm too tired to think about it.
I sent it to AVT, but I'll send it directly to.